Hello, I'm Louise Ross, the author of Women Who Walk, How 20 Women from 16 Countries Came to Live in Portugal, and the sequel or the companion read, The Winding Road to Portugal, 20 Men from 11 Countries Share Their Stories. And these two books are a collection of mini memoirs, the stories of 20 women and 20 men who moved country to country, sometimes independently and or with a partner, and en route to a life in Portugal, though for some it was not their final destination. And today I've invited one of the interviewees from Women Who Walk to read a couple of pages from her story, and then we'll talk a little about her journey. Isabelle Metairon is from France, born in Paris. She is a marine biologist and a classically trained homeopath. And we met several years ago at a social event in Lisbon, where I overheard her sharing a story that I found rather captivating. She told of playing under the piano while her mother practiced for an upcoming tour with one of the European ballet companies. So welcome, Isabelle, and thank you for joining me and having this conversation with me. And I believe your father was a musician as well. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, violinist at the orchestra in Strasbourg.
So you lived in this very musical environment, and yet you went on to study sciences.
That's what happens. I tried for a couple of years, I think, the piano, but yeah, I was more interested in biology. I think I guess with two parents, maybe I felt too much pressure, or I wasn't very good at it, possibly, or not interested. If you're not interested, you can't really get anywhere.
Yeah.
So yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to hand it off to you now to read that excerpt, and then we'll chat a little about it.
All right. Let me know if everything is sounding okay.
Well, actually, maybe just if you can hang on.
I can hold it. That might be better. Yes. Okay. All right. Like this. With the European Baccalaureate, I was accepted into a biology program, graduating several years later from University of California in Santa Cruz with a bachelor's in marine biology. I went back to France to continue my research, and while there, enrolled in a preparatory program for PhD students. Once I decided to pursue a doctorate program in marine sciences, I applied and got a scholarship at the University of Puerto Rico. While doing my PhD, I met Oscar, whose family is from El Salvador in Central America, although he grew up in California. Toward the end of my program, I took a 6-month sabbatical from my thesis work to give birth to our daughter. Not long after, I applied for postdoctoral work and ultimately pursued a project on Leastocking Island in the Bahamas with a private marine science lab to study the larval phase of the queen conch life cycle. Oh, life cycle, I'm sorry, not lifestyle. The findings were for use in fisheries management. I submitted my proposal, it was accepted, and I went with my daughter. Oscar had been accepted to the US Navy's Officers Candidate School in Newport, Rhode Island, eventually heading off on a Navy ship to Florida, which is where we ended up basing ourselves, with Oscar coming and going on various deployments. 3 years later, we moved to Rota on the Bay of Cadiz in Spain for Oscar's next duty station. Our son was born 2 months before we moved. While in Rota, I enrolled at a school in Seville to study naturopathy with a specialization in classical homeopathy. I studied in Spanish, which I'd learned in school in France, and I'd also used it while in Puerto Rico. At 35, I was the oldest student at the school. I started practicing as a traditional naturopath in Spain, but that was short-lived as we moved to Monterey, California for my husband's next duty station. Moving, changing schools, a new language, it was hard for the kids. And then 2 years later, Oscar got a job in Stuttgart, Germany. We decided the kids and I would live in Strasbourg, France, where I had grown up and where my family still lived. There were several more country changes, including 2 posting to Chile. After the second Chile posting, my husband was offered a job with the US Embassy in Lisbon, Portugal, where we lived for 3 years. These days, we move between several European cities where we spend months or perhaps just weeks. We come and go from Spain, where we have an apartment. I also attend a biannual classical homeopathy seminar in Belgium. I would like to have just one place that we call home, and we're planning on trying to create something like that. But we've been on the move all our married life, and I can't imagine settling in one place long term.
Thank you, Isabelle.
I think there's one more sentence. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
there is.
I've learned how to be very adaptable, and wherever I am, I choose to be there completely. I immerse myself and I'm very present to my life in that place for whatever amount of time I'm there. That's it.
That is that. I'm glad you interrupted me and reminded me that there was that extra sentence, because I don't think I told you, but I took that last paragraph and I made it into a little meme and I put it on to Instagram, which I do from some of the stories. And
Okay.
that certainly, that last paragraph has resonated for a lot of people. And I knew it would, because the peripatetic lifestyle of people who move country to country, whether it's for postings like Oscar and
Mm-hmm.
in the family, or whether people do it independently because that's how they want
Mm-hmm.
to live. But nevertheless, what happens is that there's this mixed feeling about that. There's the excitement of the adventure, and yet there is this sense of longing for the stability of one home. So do you still feel that?
The mixed feeling, you mean,
Yeah.
between the hmm um like you say, it's becoming a way of life. What's interesting too is I remember the first time I ended up when Oscar was in the Navy, starting with the Navy career, and I went to a spouses meeting. In those days, it was only women, because they didn't allow women on ships in the U.S. military, U.S. Navy anyway. And I remember they said, "Oh, you're starting out a Navy career. Your husband started Navy career, so you're going to be moving around and doing." And I'm like, "I've been doing this already a long time." Since I left when I was 17 from France, and I had already moved quite a bit in the States, and I had moved um, between France and the States. So it was nothing new. The difference is I was by myself, before starting a family with Oscar. So that was the difference for sure. And then being a professional and not a student anymore. So yeah, and so in terms of today, it's nice to have a place where you have, because many years, even though we would be moving to some place, we would actually sometimes have place stored, stuff stored in one place because we couldn't take everything with us, or we decided to do it that way. So our stuff was usually in different places. Now our stuff is in one place, and we are moving
You move around your stuff
and
now.
we're the one kind of, I it's just that the thing, when you move and you live places like we have friends in all these places. And I guess up to now, I mean, we can still travel. Even today we do travel. How do we see our friends? There's some of them are able to come visit, but we're talking from Chile or Argentina or California, or then it could be in the East Coast, or anybody in Europe. I mean, Spanish, I don't think we had anybody from Spain came to visit. So if we don't go to see these friends, we would never see them again. So that's kind of what's going on.
Yes, thank you. I think that's one of the things that I found unique about your story when we originally talked, is your capacity to be very present wherever you are. And for instance, you were in Lisbon recently, you're back in Spain now, but of course, when you're in Lisbon, we just kind of pick up where we left off. It's, it's like you're not even out of the country, really.
Mhm.
I mean, sometimes probably I talk to you more than I talk to my neighbor.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you have that capacity to just be very present to your life. The other thing that you mentioned there, which I'm not sure that we dug into when we did your story, but because you did have this uh, somewhat peripatetic childhood as well. I mean, you left France on your own at 17 to study in the US. You had very little English then, so it was an incredibly brave move. And from that point on, you were kind of on the move. Do you think that teen experience helped prepare you for the life that you've ultimately led?
I think so. I think so. Also, I think being raised by two artists, musicians, in the society, French society anyway, it was a bit of a odd thing. So I kind of learned not to worry too much about what other people thought about how I was going to lead my life or the decision I was making, and learn to trust what decisions I would make, about my future or about my present time. So, um, kind of being a nonconformist, not to worry too much what other people think, and then also be very relying on myself. Like you say, going at 17 in those days, I don't think I even talked to my parents for a year because it was too expensive to talk on the phone. So it was letters, So it kind of have to figure out what to do on your own. Um, and it's funny, if I could just say an interesting part. At one point, our son, when he was 14, was went back to Strasbourg to go to school for 1 year, staying with a family, not with us. We were actually in Chile. And I remember him saying how that year, even though he wasn't on his own, he had his I get he did have family there. He had his uncle and aunt, but he wasn't staying with them. He was staying with a family friend. And he says how that really taught him to rely on himself and make decisions that he was responsible for. And I think it brings a lot of responsibility, hopefully, in a person that's growing up. And so I think I kind of did the same thing. Even that, I was my first time on the plane when I went to California, my first time traveling on my own. It was like first time for a lot of things. But I was pretty confident
Yeah.
that I would figure it out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Thank you, thank you.
Yeah. Mm.
And I concur. I see you as someone who's very self-reliant, who has the capacity to just really turn within and check in with yourself in order that you make decisions that are most appropriate for you, and then the relationship and the family. So thank you for sharing some personal details of your life and an excerpt from your story. And for those listeners who are interested, of course, you can find the full story or Isabelle's story in Women Who Walk. And thanks so much, Isabelle, and let's talk again soon.
You're welcome. Thank you.